Dawn came cold and merciless, spilling its pale light across the snow-buried village like a confession. The valley was silent except for the whisper of wind through the pines and the faint echo of footsteps leading toward the clearing where fates were sealed. She stood there barefoot, trembling, her breath a small ghost in the morning air. Lyria, the lowest omega of her pack, had been summoned to the ritual stones. The elders waited, their cloaks drawn tight, eyes gleaming with the hunger of judgment. She had dreamed of this day once, believing it would reveal her mate, believing the moon goddess had not forgotten her. But dreams were kinder than truth. When the Alpha stepped forward, the air itself seemed to bow. He was radiant in power, Edric, heir of the silver bloodline, the king-to-be whose name could silence a battlefield. His mark glowed faintly on his throat, pulsing in rhythm with the prophecy written in the sky. Lyria's heart stumbled. She felt it before she saw it, the pull, the ancient tether between souls that whispered mine. For a single breath she dared to hope Dot, then his voice broke her. "I reject you." The words struck harder than any blade. The mark that had flared between them dimmed and died, leaving a hollow ache where destiny had once burned. Around them the pack murmured. Some looked away, others smirked. She tried to speak, but her voice failed beneath the weight of disbelief. Edric's gaze lingered on her, not with hatred, but with fear of what the bond meant, of the curse that haunted his bloodline. The elders declared the ceremony complete. The goddess had erred, they said. Lyria turned from the stones, from the only home she had ever known. The snow accepted her tears like old friends. Behind her, the Alpha King's mark still flickered once in secret, as if the rejection had torn something holy, and the heavens themselves were waiting to see what would bleed next. Asterisk, the forest swallowed her whole. Every step Lyria took crunched against the frostbitten ground, echoing like a heartbeat fading into distance. The air was heavy with cold mist, curling around the trees like ghosts that had forgotten their names. Her lungs burned with each breath, and still she didn't stop. Behind her the village lights flickered and vanished, the last remnants of a life that had never wanted her. The rejection mark on her chest still throbbed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with pain that felt older than she was. The moon goddess had gone silent, her bond severed, her destiny unwritten. Lyria stumbled over a root and fell to her knees, hands sinking into snow. For a moment she let herself break silent sobs shaking her body, her tears freezing before they hit the ground. She pressed her palm against the mark that should have been her salvation. It was fading now, its silver light dying like a star that burned too briefly. "Why me?" she whispered to the trees, to the heavens, to a goddess who no longer listened. The forest answered with only the soft groan of branches, but somewhere deep within the woods something did stir. A ripple of energy moved through the earth, slow, ancient, hungry. The wolves that lingered at the forest's edge lifted their heads and whimpered before retreating into the dark. The air changed. It grew warmer, heavier, almost alive. The snow melted around her in a circle of faint silver light. Lyria looked up, her tears stilled by the strange hum in her veins. She didn't know that in running from her rejection, she had crossed the boundary into the forest of the Forsaken, a place cursed by the Alpha King's ancestors, sealed from mortal eyes. Dot, as she rose, the mark on her chest flickered once more, brighter than before, not dying, changing. and in the shadows something watched her, something that had been waiting centuries for the blood of the rejected to find its way back to the curse that bore her name. Asterisk. The forest deepened into silence as Lyria wandered farther, the air thick with the scent of forgotten power. Frost glittered like glass on the branches, each tree older than memory itself. The light had begun to fade, but she didn't notice. Something was calling her, a pulse in the earth that echoed her heartbeat. The snow thinned until she stood before a ring of crumbling stone ancient ruins, half swallowed by roots and time. The air here was different, charged with a power that hummed softly, almost mournfully. The closer she stepped, the louder it grew, until it wasn't just sound it was breathing. She descended into the ruins, guided by moonlight that filtered through the cracks above. The temperature dropped sharply. At the center, a cavern opened beneath her feet, glowing faintly blue, as if the moon itself had buried a piece of its soul there. Chains hung from the walls, massive, ruined, and humming with ancient energy. And in the middle, bound by those very chains, knelt a man. He was half shadow, half gold. His hair fell like ink over his shoulders, his skin pale against the silver of his restraints. Runes burned across his chest, alive and cruel. His eyes were closed, but even in stillness, he radiated danger like the forest itself had given him form to warn the living. Lyria's breath hitched. Her mark began to burn. The man stirred. The air trembled as his chains clattered faintly. Then his voice, deep and low, rolled through the cavern like thunder trapped in stone. "Who dares enter the realm of the cursed?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. He lifted his head, and the moment his eyes met hers, gold, sharp, and filled with centuries of agony, the mark on her chest ignited like fire. The prophecy had spoken of a soul rejected at dawn who would awaken the chained Alpha King before midnight. And though she didn't know it yet, Lyria had just become the echo that would break his eternity and end her own. Asterisk. The sound of his voice rippled through her like an unseen wind, rushing against her very soul. Lyria took an unsteady step forward, her pulse fluttering in her throat like a caged bird. The air in the cavern vibrated, thick with power and warning. Every instinct screamed to run, yet her body moved closer, drawn by something older than fear. The chains that bound him glowed faintly, their runes shimmering in time with her heartbeat. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the fury in them softened to something else: recognition, disbelief, pain. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, his voice low like thunder beneath distant waves. "The curse sleeps lightly. It feeds on blood and prophecy." "I didn't come here on purpose," Lyria managed, her voice trembling. "I was rejected." Her words faltered as the mark on her chest flared bright silver, answering a silent call. The king's gaze fell to the glow, and his breath caught a sound that was almost human. "The mark of the moon's rejection," he whispered. "So it has returned." Before she could ask what he meant, one of his chains snapped with a metallic wail, spilling light into the chamber. The air shimmered, dust swirling like stars. The remaining bindings tightened around him, glowing brighter as if resisting her presence. He clenched his jaw, pain flashing across his face. "Go," he rasped, "before the curse recognizes you." But Lyria didn't move. Something deep within her, the same force that had brought her here, refused to let her flee. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the air above one of the runes. It burned cold, sending lightning through her veins. The cavern groaned, the ground trembling beneath them both. And then, in that charged silence, the last of the moonlight fell through the broken ceiling, bathing them in silver. The mark on her chest and the runes on his chains pulsed together, once, twice. And then, in unison, the bond had awakened. The cavern convulsed as if the earth itself recoiled from what had just been unleashed. A deep, hollow roar echoed through the ruins, and the chains binding the Alpha King flared blood red, their ancient runes twisting and writhing like serpents. Lyria staggered backward as a wave of dark energy exploded outward, slamming into her chest with the weight of 1,000 storms. She hit the ground hard, the air torn from her lungs, her mark blazing like molten silver. The king roared a sound not of anger, but agony. His body convulsed against the chains, muscles straining as the curse that had held him captive for centuries fought to remain unbroken. His eyes blazed gold, rimmed with crimson light, the reflection of the magic consuming him. "Get out!" he shouted, his voice fractured, almost inhuman. "The curse senses your blood. It wants to finish what destiny began." But she couldn't leave. Not now. Every instinct screamed that if she ran, he would die, and something inside her, something buried deep in her soul, refused to let that happen. Crawling forward against the gale of energy, she reached for him again, her fingers trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Then let it come for me," she cried. "If it wants blood, take mine." The moment her hand brushed the glowing rune across his chest, the storm imploded. The red light shattered into 1,000 embers, dissolving into the air. Silence followed, a heavy, sacred kind of silence that only comes after death or revelation. The chains stopped thrashing. One by one, they fell, each impact echoing through the cavern like the tolling of a great bell. The Alpha King collapsed to his knees, gasping, smoke rising from his wrists where the shackles had burned him. When his eyes met hers again, they were no longer gold-rimmed with fury. They were warm, human, alive. "What have you done?" he whispered, awe and fear tangled in his voice. Lyria looked down at her hands. The silver mark that once symbolized rejection now shimmered gold. "I broke your curse," she said softly, her voice trembling, but the king's gaze darkened. "No," he murmured. "You didn't break it. You took it." The glow around them dimmed, leaving only the rhythmic echo of their breathing. For a moment it almost felt peaceful, the ruins hushed, the storm gone. But then a searing pain ripped through Lyria's chest. She gasped, clutching the glowing mark as it burned brighter than ever before, twisting violently under her skin like a living serpent. The king lunged forward, catching her before she fell, his hand steady but his eyes wide with dread. "It's transferring," he whispered, voice breaking. "The curse isn't gone. It's found a new vessel." His fingers trembled as they pressed against her heart, feeling the unnatural pulse that wasn't hers alone. "It's inside you now." Lyria tried to speak, but her words fractured into gasps. Visions flooded her mind, fragments of memory not her own. A battlefield soaked in blood. A woman crowned in silver flames. The moon goddess weeping beneath a sky split by lightning. She saw him, the king, chained by divine hands, screaming her name, but not her name. Lyara. She jerked back, staring at him in horror. "I saw her," she breathed. The one who cursed you. The moon's chosen, Lyra. His expression twisted into anguish. She was my mate, he said, voice barely audible. The goddess made her my equal, my undoing. When she turned her power against me, the heavens cursed us both. She died, and I was bound. And now I bear what was hers, Lyria whispered, realization dawning like a cruel sunrise. The air around them grew colder, and faint whispers filled the cavern, echoes of 1,000 forgotten prayers. The mark on her chest shimmered, shifting shape, the crescent of the moon goddess entwined with the sigil of a king. He reached for her face, his touch reverent, almost broken. You were never meant to find me, he said softly. Fate has rewritten the cycle. Again, tears welled in her eyes as her body trembled under the weight of something divine and unbearable. Then tell me, she whispered, voice shaking, how do I survive what she couldn't? The king's gaze hardened with both sorrow and resolve. By becoming what she never dared to be, the one who controls the curse instead of being consumed by it. Asterisk, the night beyond the runes stretched endless and hollow, the stars watching like silent witnesses as the Alpha King guided Lyria through the shattered halls of his prison. The air shimmered faintly with residual magic, each breath tasting of ash and moonlight. He led her to an open clearing where the forest met the ancient stones, a place where the veil between worlds felt thin enough to tear. Listen, he said quietly, his voice carrying a command that hummed beneath the surface of the world itself. You can hear it now, the heartbeat of the curse. At first she heard nothing. Then, faintly, the forest began to breathe with her, leaves rustling in rhythm, the wind pulsing like blood in a vein. It was intoxicating and terrifying. She could feel every trembling life around her, the sleeping roots below, the wolves prowling miles away, the moon itself whispering her name. Her knees weakened. It's too much, she gasped. It's inside everything. The king caught her before she fell. Yes, he murmured, his voice low and steady. The curse was once mine. Now it's yours. It ties you to the world, but without control, it will devour you. He circled her slowly, the faint silver glow of his power weaving through his fingertips. You must learn to anchor it, to command it. Power without will is ruin. How? She whispered, eyes glistening. Through balance, he said simply. Not dominance. You must listen to what the curse wants, and teach it what you need. He gestured toward the moon above, swollen, watchful, bleeding its light over them. She watches still, the goddess who made and unmade me. She may have cursed at me, but she gave you choice. Lyria's breath trembled. She closed her eyes, the mark on her chest glowing softly. The pain began to subside, replaced by a steady pulse, not fury, not chaos, but something like understanding. When she opened her eyes, they shimmered faintly with silver fire. Then teach me, she said, before it consumes me as it did her. He smiled, a rare, haunted smile. Then, Omega, he said, his tone reverent, you will learn to become the moon's requiem. Asterisk, the training began beneath the silver eye of the full moon, its light pouring through the skeletal trees like liquid truth. The Alpha King stood before her, his posture still regal, despite centuries of imprisonment, his presence heavy enough to bend the night itself. Around them the forest was silent, waiting. Only the faint hum of power connected them, the echo of the curse pulsing in unison through their veins. "Power," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "is not fire or fury. It's harmony. The curse listens, Lyria, always. It craves a master, not a victim." She knelt on the damp earth, her palms flat against the soil, feeling the heartbeat of the world beneath her fingers. Every sound was amplified. The whisper of leaves, the flutter of wings, the faint sigh of the wind through stone. She reached for that rhythm, and it reached back. For a fleeting second she felt everything. The forest exhaled. The stars pulsed in answer. Her soul resonated with the pulse of creation itself. Then it broke. The energy surged uncontrollably, exploding outward in a burst of golden-white flame. Trees shuddered. The ground cracked. The king moved instantly, grabbing her wrists, his power wrapping around hers like iron around lightning. "Breathe," he commanded. "Do not fight it, guide it." Lyria's eyes glowed with divine light as she gasped for control. "It's too strong." "Then let it be strong," he roared, his voice shaking the air. "Strength is not your enemy. Fear is." She met his gaze, their marks glowing in unison, threads of silver energy weaving between them. In that instant, something shifted. The curse's chaos stilled, drawn to the fragile balance between their wills. The energy condensed into light, wrapping around her body like a living constellation before fading back into calm. When it was over, she collapsed into his arms, trembling but alive. The mark on her chest had changed, its edges sharp and defined, its color now deep silver streaked with gold. The king stared at her, awe flickering across his battle-scarred face. "You did it," he murmured. "You've begun to tame it." Lyria's voice was barely a whisper. "No," she said. "It listened to you." And the king, for the first time in centuries, looked away, because he knew that somewhere between power and pain, the curse had found a bond far more dangerous than either of them expected. Asterisk, the nights that followed, blurred into one long, silver dream. Every dusk began with training, every dawn ended with exhaustion. Yet, beneath the cold discipline, something else stirred, something the Alpha King hadn't intended. The curse was changing, binding them in ways neither could control. It wasn't merely power flowing between them anymore. It was emotion, raw and unguarded. Lyria would feel his anger before he spoke, his grief in the stillness between lessons. When her control wavered, it wasn't his command that steadied her. It was his heartbeat echoing through the bond. And in moments of silence, when moonlight painted his features in shades of melancholy gold, she saw not a monster or a legend, but a man undone by destiny. One night, under the blood moon, their training reached its breaking point. The king demanded she call the curse by name, to summon it, command it. "You must own what you fear," he said, voice low, breath visible in the chill. "If you deny it, it will devour you from within." Lyria closed her eyes and exhaled, her trembling fingers curling in the air. The mark on her chest flared, and a haunting hum filled the clearing, deep and mournful. The trees bent, shadows stirred, and from the darkness came a voice, her own, layered with the echo of 1,000 lifetimes. "You carry the sorrow of the moon," it whispered, "and yet you still reach for dawn." The king froze. The voice was not just the curse's. It was hers, Lyra's, his lost mate. The memory hit him like a blade, cutting through centuries of restraint. He stepped forward before he could stop himself, his hand reaching to steady Lyria. But the moment their skin met, a surge of power erupted between them. It wasn't pain this time. It was revelation. The curse recognized both, the blood of the lost and the soul of the reborn. Lyria gasped as fragments of Lyra's memories flashed before her eyes, the king's laughter, his vows beneath the moon, the night betrayal shattered everything. When the vision faded, she stumbled back, tears streaking her cheeks. "I saw her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I saw what you lost." The king's voice broke, quiet, human, fragile. "Then you understand," he said, "why I cannot lose again." But as the moon bled crimson above them, Lyria felt the truth thrumming through her mark. Fate did not ask for understanding. It demanded surrender. That night the vision refused to fade. Even as the fire died and the world went quiet, Lyria still saw flashes behind her eyelids, the trembling hands of the queen who came before her the moment the curse was born. Lyra's scream echoed like a fracture in the air, splitting time itself. The memory wasn't hers, yet it clawed through her chest, as though it had always belonged there. Far above the forest, clouds began to gather, veiling the blood moon in trembling silver mist. The Alpha King stood a few feet away, watching her as though she might vanish. His voice when he spoke was soft but burdened. "She was not meant to bear that power alone," he said. "The moon goddess created balance, two souls, one bond. But I failed her, and the curse was my punishment." Lyria turned toward him, the faint glow of her mark pulsing in rhythm with his. "Then why did she choose me?" she asked. "Why give me her pain?" He looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. "Because the goddess never punishes without purpose. Perhaps she is giving me a second chance through you." But neither of them knew that the moment the vision touched her, something ancient had awakened beyond the veil. Deep within the cursed forest, where shadows fed on forgotten prayers, an ancient seer opened her blind eyes. Her name was Selene, once the keeper of the old prophecies long thought dead. The runes carved into her skin pulsed with light as she whispered into the night. So the cycle begins again. The blood of the cursed king meets the soul of the reborn Luna. Her voice traveled like a ripple through the unseen. Far away, in a crumbling citadel of obsidian and frost, another presence stirred, one not bound by prophecy, but by vengeance. The first bearer of the curse, the one who had defied both moon and mate, awoke. Her eyes glowed red like dying embers. "The moon dares repeat her mistake," she hissed. "Then let me be the one to correct it." Back in the clearing, Lyria shivered. She didn't know why, but the air had shifted, heavy, cold, watchful. The king sensed it too. His golden eyes flicked toward the tree line, his expression darkening. "Someone," he murmured, "is listening." And in the shadows, the ancient seer smiled, for destiny, once again, had found its flame. Sleep came reluctantly to the Alpha King that night, and when it did, it was poisoned by memory. The forest outside was still, too still, as if the world itself held its breath. The fire in the hearth had died, yet a pale silver light flickered along the walls of his chamber. It wasn't moonlight. It was the whisper of prophecy breaking through the veiled dot in the dream. He found himself standing in a frozen clearing beneath a sky that bled silver rain. The snow shimmered with veins of light that pulsed in time with a heartbeat hers. And then he saw her, the seer Selene, her blind eyes open and glowing. She stood barefoot in the snow, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 generations. "The curse does not die," she said, her tone both pitying and cruel. "It sleeps, waiting for the heart brave enough to love what destiny has marked for ruin." The king clenched his fists, his breath fogging in the cold. "What are you saying, witch?" Selene's gaze pierced through him, though she was blind. "The moon has given you a mirror, not a mate. What you see in her is not love reborn, but consequence repeating itself. If you claim her, your fates entwine. One will rise, the other will fall. Balance must be restored." The wind howled, carrying the echo of a wolf's distant cry. "Then let me fall," he said, "if it means her survival." Selene tilted her head, almost amused. "You misunderstand. The moon takes what she loves to remind the world of what cannot be kept. You cannot save her by loving her. You will destroy her by trying." The light in her eyes flared, and suddenly the world around him cracked. Snow, light, sky, all collapsing into blackness. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the faint scent of silver ash still clinging to the air. Outside his tent, the horizon glowed with the first breath of dawn. But the king's heart was cold. For the first time in centuries he feared not war, nor curse, but prophecy, and somewhere beyond the mountains, the seer's words reached Lyria in her sleep. She awoke gasping, her mark burning, whispering one word she didn't understand. Double quotes, balance. Asterisk. Morning came, but warmth did not. The king's tent stood open to the rising light, yet he lingered in the shadows, his expression carved from guilt and something colder, resignation. The prophecy had rooted itself in his mind like a splinter beneath skin, impossible to ignore. If you claim her, one will rise, the other will fall. He watched her train beyond the ridge, her form steady and fluid as the dawn wind. The silver aura around her glowed brighter than ever, bending toward the light as if it longed for freedom. She was growing stronger, too strong, and with every surge of her power, he felt the curse stir, an invisible tether between them, tightening with dangerous intent. When she sensed him watching, she smiled, small, hopeful. But he turned away. "Again," he said curtly to her when she approached. "Control your energy before it controls you." His words landed like frost. Her smile faltered. "You're distant again," she murmured. "Every time I get stronger, you pull further away." "It's for your safety," he replied, his tone sharp enough to hide the tremor beneath. She stepped closer, the silver in her eyes catching the sun. "No, it's fear. You're afraid of what I'm becoming, or what we're becoming." He didn't answer. The silence between them was deafening, filled with everything they couldn't say. When she turned to leave, the mark on her chest flickered violently, and pain lanced through them both. Shared, identical. He gasped, gripping his chest, and she stumbled, her hands clutching the earth. Their bond was no longer passive. It reacted to emotion. His distance wounded her, and her pain punished him in return. The curse had found balance through suffering. Enough. He roared, the ground trembling beneath his voice. But the curse did not obey him. The bond pulsed again, this time harder, throwing them both to their knees. Lyria looked up, breathless, her eyes wide with terror and understanding. "It doesn't want distance," she whispered. "It wants unity." It's not meant to be broken." The king met her gaze, his chest heaving. "Then it's not a bond," he said bitterly. "It's a prison." And for the first time, she saw the truth, that his greatest battle wasn't with fate or the curse, but with himself. That night the moon rose shrouded in stormlight, its silver glow fractured by restless clouds. The air itself tasted electric, the scent of rain and old magic. Both the Alpha King and Lyria lay restless in their separate chambers, though neither truly slept. The curse was awake, weaving between their souls like a serpent made of smoke and memory. It began softly, a whisper threading through Lyria's mind, a familiar voice calling her name. "Lyria!" She turned in her sleep, the sound fragile and sorrowful, like wind over glass. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't in her tent anymore. She stood in a field of dying moonflowers, their petals curling in black frost. Ahead of her she saw the king, but younger, his eyes bright and unscarred. He was kneeling beside a grave made of silver stone. "Lyra?" He whispered to the name carved into the stone, and the world seemed to weep around him. "I failed you. I failed the world." Lyria's breath caught. She tried to step forward, but her feet sank into the soil, soft, pulling, consuming. When she looked down, the ground was bleeding light, tendrils of silver wrapping around her ankles. The curse was binding her to the memory. Suddenly, the king's head snapped up, his golden eyes meeting hers. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice breaking with fear. "This isn't yours to see." But before she could speak, the vision shifted. Now he was the one dreaming, standing on the cliffs above the old battlefield, the scent of iron and ash filling the air. Through the fog, he saw her, Lyria, standing at the edge, the wind tearing through her hair. "You left me," she said, though her voice was Lyra's. "You let me die." He stumbled back, gripping his chest as the mark on his heart seared with molten pain. No, it's not real." But it was. The curse was merging their souls, forcing them to bear each other's torment until neither could tell whose pain belonged to whom. They woke at the same moment, screaming each other's names. Lyria's tears glowed silver on her cheeks. "Why are we being shown this?" she gasped. The king's answer came hoarse, haunted. "Because the curse has decided," he said. "If we won't face our pasts, it will make us relive them." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, the first warning that their bond was no longer just emotional. It was evolving. By the next night, neither dared to close their eyes. Every flicker of shadow seemed to whisper. Every gust of wind carried fragments of a voice that was not their own. The curse had grown restless, no longer confined to dreams. It bled into waking hours, merging the past and present, until the line between them blurred, like mist over a mirrored. As the storm raged beyond the citadel walls. Lyria and the Alpha King stood within the temple ruins, the only place where moonlight still dared to fall. The floor was etched with the old lunar runes, their faint glow pulsing like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. "It's showing us her death," Lyria said softly, her hands trembling as she traced one of the symbols. "But not as punishment? As remembrance?" The king turned away, jaw tight. "I remember enough." "No," she whispered, stepping closer. "You remember your guilt, not the truth." Before he could respond, the moonlight deepened into a molten silver flood. and the runes on the ground erupted with power. In an instant, the world around them melted away. The temple dissolved into a battlefield drenched in lunar fire. They were no longer spectators. They were inside the memory. Lyria gasped as she looked down at herself, or rather, at Lyara, the woman whose bloodline she carried. Her skin glowed with the same markings, but brighter, fierce with divine energy. Across the flames stood the king, his armor blackened, his hands drenched in silver light. "Lyara," he shouted. "You cannot contain it. The goddess lied to us." Lyra's voice was trembling but resolute. "If I stop now, it will consume everything. The world burns unless one of us breaks the bond." He stepped forward, desperation twisting his face. "Then let it burn. I won't lose you." But the moonlight exploded, not in rage, but in mercy. Lyra smiled through the tears, whispering, "Then remember me as the one who saved you." And with one last breath, she drew the curse into herself, sealing it with her death, leaving him alive, bound to eternal guilt. The vision shattered. Lyria fell to her knees, sobbing, as the king stood frozen, pale and hollow. Now she knew. The moon goddess had never cursed him. She had chosen him to carry the weight of love that could never die. And Lyria, the reincarnated echo of that love, was now the key that could either end it or begin it again. The next dawn came colorless, no warmth, no songbirds, just the wind's hollow cry through the ruins. The king stood alone by the altar, where moonlight still shimmered faintly across the stone, his expression carved in shadow. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted by the truth they could no longer deny. Lyara had died to protect the world, and now the same power stirred within Lyria's veins. He could not allow history to repeat when Lyria entered. Her footsteps soft against the marble. He didn't turn to face her. "The goddess has a cruel sense of humor," he said quietly. "I see now what she intends, to test the same love twice, to see if this time one of us can watch the other die and still call it mercy." Her voice was trembling but firm. "Then let her watch us defy her." He finally turned. There was anguish in his gaze, but also resignation. "You don't understand. Lyra's sacrifice created balance. Your existence threatens it. The power within you. It feeds on emotion, on our bond. If we stay connected, it will destroy you as it destroyed her." She stepped closer, fire flickering in her eyes. "And if you sever it?" "I take the curse back," he said, "into myself, where it belongs." Lyria's heart stuttered. "You'll die." He smiled, weary, tragic, beautiful. "I already did once. The rest is just consequence." She reached for him, but he caught her wrist, pressing her hand to his chest. The mark beneath his skin pulsed like dying starlight. "When the moon reaches its peak tonight, I'll perform the severance. You'll live. You'll be free." Her tears fell, glittering like liquid moonlight. "Free of you is not freedom." But he turned away, his voice breaking. "It's survival." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, not from the storm, but from the heavens themselves. The goddess was listening, her judgment woven into the clouds, and as night crept closer, the bond between them began to weaken, tearing thread by thread, leaving both gasping in the ache of something sacred unraveling. Yet even as he prepared to die for her, she was already planning to save him by rewriting the very law of the moon by dusk. The mountain was shrouded in silver mist, its peaks lost to the clouds like ghosts refusing to rest. Lyria stood at the temple's edge, wind tugging at her cloak, eyes fixed on the rising moon. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat echoed with his name. She knew what he planned, to sever their bond and take the curse into himself, to die so she could live. But destiny had stolen enough from her bloodline. Not again. She turned from the view, her mind made of steel and sorrow. Somewhere deep beneath the ruins in the catacombs where the first Luna priestesses had once whispered their prayers, there existed a ritual long forbidden, the reversal of the moon. It was said to rewrite divine law, to transfer the weight of fate from the gods back to the mortal heart. It required one thing the goddess never forgave: defiance. She descended the steps into the darkness, her hands trembling as she lit the old braziers. The carvings on the walls seemed to move, alive with ancient warnings. The air was heavy with incense and dust, the scent of sacrifice lingering through the centuries' dot as she laid her palms on the stone altar. Her mark began to glow, brighter than it ever had before, a living flame of silver and gold. The temple trembled, recognizing the power in her defiance. Her voice was steady, echoing through the hollow chamber. I reject your design, goddess. I reject the fate that steals love and calls it balance. One choose my own end. The air split with a sound like thunder underwater. The light intensified until it painted her in blinding brilliance. Her blood sang with power, ancient and alive. But with it came a cost, the same pain Lyra once bore. Her vision blurred. Her body convulsed under the pressure of creation itself. Far above, the king felt it. The bond they shared flared violently, drawing him to her like gravity to a star. He ran through the corridors, shouting her name, the ground quaking beneath his feet. When he reached the temple doors, the light pouring from within was unbearable. Lyria! He roared. Stop this madness. But through the brilliance, her voice came calm, defiant, unbroken. Not madness, she whispered. Freedom! And the moon itself began to weep silver rain. The temple roared with light so fierce it seemed to strip the color from the world. When the Alpha King forced open the massive doors, a torrent of wind and radiance struck him like a divine wall. He staggered, eyes burning. Yet he pushed forward, step by agonizing step, until he could finally see her, Lyria, standing at the altar's center, bathed in lunar fire, her hair lifted in the storm of energy, her eyes twin crescents of blinding silver. The mark on her chest had bloomed into a full moon, its edges pulsing like a heartbeat. The air shimmered with something beyond mortal comprehension, the hum of creation itself. Then the light bent, coalescing behind her. Out of it stepped a figure neither woman nor wolf, clothed in stars and sorrow, the moon goddess. Her face was both beautiful and unbearable to behold, her voice layered with eternity. Child of defiance, she said, her tone neither cruel nor kind. You stand against me, the hand that wrote your story. Lyria's knees trembled, yet she did not bow. You wrote tragedy and called it fate. You made love a weapon and sacrifice a rule. I won't be another chapter of loss. The goddess tilted her head, faint amusement flickering in her gaze. You mistake my cruelty for balance. Without sacrifice, creation falls apart. You are born from death, bound to repeat it. I'm not Lyra, Lyria said, voice trembling but true. And he's not your martyr. The goddess stepped closer, each movement rippling the air like waves over glass. You would unmake prophecy for one heart? Lyria met her gaze, fire against moonlight. For mine. Behind her the king dropped to one knee, torn between awe and agony. Please, he choked, his voice breaking. If punishment must fall, let it be upon me. The goddess looked between them, the cursed king and the defiant Luna, and for the first time in centuries, her expression softened. You mortals never learn. You would rather burn than bend. Then she raised her hand. So burn. Light erupted like a storm. The temple shattered. The mountain screamed, and the world fell silent, save for one sound. Lyria's heart still beating within the blinding white. The world dissolved into light and ruin. The mountain cracked open, rivers of molten silver coursing through its veins as the temple collapsed in a storm of divine wrath. The air burned thick with starlight and ash. Yet in the heart of that chaos, Lyria still stood, her body trembling, her spirit unbroken. The moon goddess loomed above her like an eclipse-given form, wings of shimmering dust unfurling across the shattered sky. You challenged the divine order, the goddess thundered. You called defiance virtue and love salvation. Tell me, child, what gives you the right to stand against eternity? Lyria's voice came ragged, but it carried through the roar. Pain, she said. The pain of every soul you've broken in the name of balance. Lyra's, his, mine. You created us to love and then punished us for obeying our nature. If that's eternity, then it deserves to end. The goddess's gaze blazed. Then end it you shall. She extended her hand and the sky fell. Spears of moonlight rained down, tearing the mountain apart. The king shielded his eyes as the ground split between them, a chasm glowing with molten light. He saw her, his Luna, standing in the center of the storm, her outline fading against the brilliance. Lyria, he shouted, voice raw, desperate. Enough, you'll die. But she turned toward him, smiling through the tears. Then I'll die free. The goddess raised her arm for the final blow, but Lyria did not move. Instead, she reached within herself, into the mark that linked her to every Luna who had come before. She felt Lyra's heartbeat, faint and far, but alive in memory. She felt the king's anguish, his love, his endless grief. And from that pain she drew power. The silver in her veins turned gold. Her eyes blazed like suns. I am not your creation, she declared. I am your consequence. The blast of energy that followed was not of destruction, but of reversal. Moonlight shattered into dawnlight. The goddess screamed, not in rage, but disbelief, as her divine form began to unravel. The king fell to his knees, blinded by radiance, as the temple vanished in an explosion of light that swallowed the mountain whole dot, and then silence, dot, silence. For the first time in centuries, true silence. No whisper of the curse. No hum of divine power. Only the soft crackle of dying embers and the breath of dawn sliding across a broken world. The mountain that had once touched the heavens now lay humbled, its peak shorn away, its stones scattered like bones beneath the rising sun. The Alpha King awoke amid the ruins, half buried in dust and moonlight. His body ached with the weight of survival, each movement heavy as if gravity itself mourned. Around him the air shimmered faintly, echoes of the divine storm still dissolving into morning mist. He coughed, the taste of ash and silver thick on his tongue, and called out the only name that mattered. "Lyria?" His voice broke. There was no answer. Only the wind sighing through the wreckage, soft and mournful. He pushed himself to his feet, limping through what remained of the temple. The marble floor was scorched and veined with golden cracks that pulsed faintly, alive. Where the altar once stood, it was now only a crater of light, a hollow pool filled with shimmering water that reflected the dawn sky. He fell to his knees beside it, staring at the reflection, not of his own face, but hers. Lyria standing in the center of the pool, untouched by ruin, her skin aglow with threads of gold and silver, her eyes like the calm after thunder. "You shouldn't be alive," he whispered, awe and terror mingling in his tone. She smiled softly, stepping from the water, the ripples turning to light beneath her feet. "I'm not," she said. "Not as I was." He reached out, trembling, but when his fingers brushed her skin, it was warm, heartbreakingly real. Yet there was something else in her aura, something older, steadier, the same divine pulse that once belonged to the goddess. "You?" He breathed. "What have you done?" "I didn't kill her," Lyria said, her voice gentle, serene. "I became her." Above them, the new sun rose, silver at its edges, golden at its heart, Dot, and for the first time since the dawn of wolves and gods, the world was balanced, Dot, but balance always demands a price. The dawn stretched across the world like a slow exhale, soft, golden, and heavy with new beginnings. The temple lay in ruins, yet the air shimmered with peace, as if the earth itself was relieved to breathe again. The curse had lifted, its echo fading into the wind. But in the heart of that silence, something divine still lingered. Lyria. She stood at the edge of the broken altar, her hair glinting like woven light, her mark now a perfect crescent etched in gold. The Alpha King watched her, torn between awe and fear. She was no longer just his Luna, no longer mortal. The divinity in her veins hummed like starlight contained within flesh. The moon goddess had not died. She had been reborn through her defiance. "Lyria," he said quietly, the name trembling from his lips like a prayer. "If you've become her, if you've taken her place, then what happens to you?" She smiled, gentle, distant, almost sorrowful. "Balance has been restored. The curse is gone, but it cannot vanish entirely. It must live somewhere." Realization struck him. "No," he whispered, his voice raw. "Not again. Not you." She stepped forward, her touch cool against his cheek. "Don't mourn me," she said softly. "This is not death, it's transcendence. The goddess demanded a vessel, but I chose the shape of mercy." Tears shimmered in his golden eyes. "You broke the laws of gods and fate, only to bind yourself to another prison." Her smile deepened, radiant through the sorrow. "Then let this prison be my kingdom." The air trembled. The light around her grew brighter, wrapping her in threads of moonfire and dawn. As she began to fade, he caught her hand, holding it against his heart. "Will I see you again?" he asked. Dot, her voice was faint, ethereal. "You already do. Every night you look at the moon, I'll be there. And when you howl beneath it, I'll answer." The light consumed her. The mountain fell still. The first rays of sunrise crowned the king as he stood alone before the horizon, his heart both broken and sanctified, for love had rewritten fate, and in doing so, created something stronger than destiny, an eternal bond between man and moon. And so, the legend was born, the king who loved the goddess, and the Luna who chose to become one.